scientists and researchers on Reddit. How do you deal with family members, loved ones who tend to have strong opinions on scientific methodology and topics that they do not understand, often basing their opinions on the internet, rather than listening to someone who has had several years of training? I like to engage them in a friendly manner, listen to what they have to say, and gently ask them to consider some alternatives. Usually it doesn't work and they insist on reiterating their crazy point again, at which point I just have to say okay, sure, and walk away. Generally, the cookie family members I have didn't reason themselves into weird pseudoscience. They believe in it because it makes sense or appeals to their biases in some way. So I'm not going to change their minds overnight by showing them data. You can only change people's minds away from this kind of thing in very small ways over a long period of time. I'm not a scientist with any credentials, but on topics that I have a fairly good understanding of and can recognize when someone doesn't have the first clue, I tend to shut them down by asking for a basic explanation of the subject matter. When they inevitably can't explain, that's the end of the discussion. For example, when a creationist declares that the second law of thermodynamics disproves evolution, what are the other laws of thermodynamics? They never seem to know. Like I said, I don't have any fancy degrees or anything, but I don't think it's unreasonable to conclude that if you're not even informed enough to summarize the theory, then you're hardly qualified to tell me that its practical consequences are, or a good, relevant example is masks. Why do I need to wear a mask? Yours works, doesn't it? Yes, it does, but you don't understand what it's actually doing. It works because it catches the vapor that I breathe out. It doesn't filter the air that I breathe in. Honestly, when they have strong opinions, I can usually outtalk them and convince them about what the scientific consensus is. The crucial thing to this is to be patient and to not make them feel stupid when you're explaining it. The second you begin to insult them, you have lost the battle in more ways than one. Patience and a willingness to walk away from anything too crazy. I work in biotech and I've had several people tell me passionately why essential oils are better than pharmaceuticals. My canned response is, if you can manage less serious conditions with milder treatments, great. We mostly make drugs for cancer and stuff like arthritis. Things where diet and exercise can't mitigate symptoms on their own. Please don't try to treat cancer with oils alone, but go ahead and keep using them for your insomnia, digestive issues, and mild depression. I have gotten into arguments with conspiracy theory folks who think there are cures from cancer being hidden because Big Pharma wants to sell expensive treatments, not cures. For miracle cures you could charge $1 million and make billions. One small upside of how leaky IP tends to be is if it existed, someone would have it. Medicine does a poor job treating less serious conditions, which is why people turn to the University of Google. The fine line is when people want to forego real medical treatment for snake oil. Not a scientist, but a woman who has had all aspects of womanhood, feminism, equality, and how I should or should not cope or behave around such issues lectured and explained to me by so many men, who then get hostile when I disagree. I imagine that they eventually just give up and walk away. What else can you do? There will always be a type of person who will completely dismiss actual experience in favor of their own ideas. I'm not a professional rather than an aspiring professional in that area, and it's really hard when I have serious mental issues I'm trying to solve but get hit with alternative medicine that a quick research will tell you isn't any better than a placebo, to just be told why don't you research positive things. I've somewhat given up with my boomer relatives. I just get called a liberal and apparently that discounts my view. I didn't realize liberals are the only people who believe in science. My apologies. Boomers are willing to believe things they see on Facebook more than they'll believe a person going for their PhD in chemistry. I just read a previous post about people who were right with self-diagnosis when doctors were wrong. Truth is, people in their field are wrong sometimes, and science will contradict or change its opinion over time. So, I meet most things with skepticism if it seems off to me. If it's wildly outside of my purview and have no way of conducting my own research, I will generally just listen. Aunt is highly educated, master's level graduate with multiple majors. She studied statistics and organic chemistry and went down several other science mathematics-based paths. She questions if maybe BPA in baby bottles turns children gay, and perhaps we don't know enough about 5G to say it's safe. She swears there is a deep state coup happening as we speak and that Trump is really America's hero. Just wait and see. I always scratch my head when she starts a new group chat with the family. Here is one for you. I know guy who has lived in the same R for nearly 60 years. He is one of those old guys that has been taking the temperature and rainfall data for the same period of time. He also travels extensively, especially to the upper Midwest, Banff being one of his favorite places. He talks about how temperatures are higher, rainfall is less, and the glaciers in the upper Midwest are no longer where they were 50 years ago. Yet he is adamant that climate change is not true. To each their own, dude. Even science doesn't understand everything, and it's not worth fighting over with anyone, especially family, so breathe and allow folks their opinions even if they're absurd. I stopped talking to them tbh. Come to think of it, my immediate family doesn't really associate with them anymore either, since their opinions on the facts is so butt backwards. I don't. If they don't ask questions, they don't want to learn. They want to share their uneducated preconceived notions about something they don't know crap about. Realize that it's not a discussion to reach a shared understanding based on objective evidence, rather a psychological need to be right and matter. That's not science, so scientific discussion can affect that. Additionally, imagine studying something at an extremely rigorous level that consumes almost your entire life for 7 years to have someone that saw something they think is relevant on TV months ago for 2 minutes try to teach you on the topic. How freaking frustrated and insulted would you be? It's best to just completely avoid the conversation. Just say, like you considered their comment and change topics. You don't broach it and you learn to go deaf. Because often it comes down to what they want to believe rather than fact. Though I've since cut my family off due to other reasons, and it's been one heck of a relief. I have a degree in the microbiology, but I don't have a job in the field because my interests and hubs work have carried me elsewhere. When my co-workers start in on their pet medical theories, I keep my mouth shut and absorb it all. Then I retell the stories for the amusement of my family. People who rely on belief and faith without proper scientific methodology or even a modicum of peer review deserve to be the laughingstock of dinnertime tales. Interjecting with rational thoughts isn't going to change their minds, so I may as well enjoy myself. Laugh at them in secret, but in person be sure to sanitize shared spaces like my life depends on it, because it probably does. I'm not a professional researcher, I'm a senior undergrad student, but I do research in a lab as a hobby. I've been published twice so far, once as first author and once as co-author. My second publication was in Nature Medicine the past few months. I've been working on a set of COVID-19 projects in the lab. One of the COVID projects I worked on is in Press at Nature. My father is convinced, absolutely convinced, despite the mountains of evidence to the contrary, that SARS-CoV-2 was a man-made virus, and that the Chinese deliberately released it. We got into a shouting match over it, and it was then that I realized that the best way to deal with family members who are proudly ignorant, touting their degree from the University of Facebook, is to ignore them. You're not going to change their minds. They are going to remain firmly ignorant and proud of themselves for remaining so. And so the best thing to do is to preserve your own well-being and stop getting into arguments with them. I think it was Mark Twain who said this. Never argue with an idiot. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. I think a lot of scientists feel that it's their job to convince the everyday public of things, and this is where I disagree with a lot of them. Scientists grossly misallocate resources trying to get public buy-in. There's no point in trying to convince the average idiot that science is useful or correct. All we have to do is convince the idiots at the top, the politicians, that science is useful or correct. And it's far easier to convince a few dozen politicians than it is to convince the millions of people who think vaccines cause autism or that the earth is flat. Honestly, I think we just need to put out a bunch of giant sticky traps and bathe them with truck nuts and designer handbags. We have a serious infestation of stupid. Someone so obstinate and dogmatic do not have the capacity for introspection that's intrinsic to recanting asinine opinions. If someone is pontificating about forensic entomology, I've tried to be diplomatic and elaborate upon misconceptions, misapprehensions, and just flagrant subversive nonsense, but I've never encountered anyone with entrenched opinions to be amenable to correction or even guidance to sources who'd corroborate what I'm saying. Many members of my family are provincials who hold education in contempt, so I'm accustomed to maintaining an impassive expression when they start pontificating. My mother disdains my profession because death renders me impure, so I'm also accustomed to being harangued by my elders for my irreverence. I had a doctor with 20+ years professional experience misdiagnose my condition. I did some reading on the internet and identified a condition which matched my anecdotal experiences. I had to argue this with 3 different GPs for several years before I finally got a referral to a specialist who confirmed that I had that condition. Sorry if you have a strong opinion on this, but just know you are not infallible. I also have a degree in a research related field. The only time I visited or made contact with campus was to submit papers or sit exams, and I saved a ton of cash by avoiding the required textbooks. I did have the advantage of having access to subscription journals, but you can get access to a good variety of free articles from Google Scholar. I do get what you are saying. I hate armchair experts and I wouldn't trust an unaccredited mechanic or heart surgeon. But what you are saying ultimately is that we should appeal to the authority of accreditation when trying to determine the validity of an argument. In reality, there are experienced experts in most fields that never engaged in any formal training. Though, I get that they are outliers and that the specific people you are referring to don't fit this category, but I still feel like this rant was worthwhile. I would be in a lot worse position if listened to the advice of every expert with training in their field who was trying to sell me something that I didn't need. I love how this question is a reformulation of people who are right. How are you dealing with people who are wrong? Hopefully the most popular answer being ask questions. Try to understand his point until it's obviously wrong is an invite for a real discussion. Saying I say my points then I go away in fact is the answer of the people who are wrong. The issue is that science has becoming extremely political. There are well-known and documented scientific facts that if spoken aloud will get a scientist fired and shamed. For example, global warming. It is often cited that 90+% of climate scientists believe in global warming. Now, imagine you are a climate scientist and actually believe the evidence points to something else. Are you going to say anything? Are you going to risk being absolutely ridiculed and cast out by the scientific community? Probably not. There are certain things you simply are not allowed to question without the entire system coming down on you. Just look at the peer review system and how fricked it is. Almost nothing can be duplicated with any statistical meaningfulness. It's just a scientific echo chamber that doesn't question anything considered taboo. Scientists are just people, and as such are able to be manipulated by the society they live in. 300 years ago, 200 years ago, 100, heck even 50. Sure, science was very solid and ran by professionals that weren't afraid to rock the boat a little, but now it's a bunch of lemmings that are afraid to stick their necks out to question even the slightest thing. It's become all political and scientists are not to be trusted any more than politicians. Their data is just an opinion at this point. I can find conflicting studies and statistics on anything you like, and spin them any way you like. The issue isn't why doesn't someone believe scientists, it's why do you believe them. Science is just a modern religion and has totally lost its way as far as critical thinking is concerned. This is very boomer. My mom does this all the time. She is in her early 60s and this is very irritating for me. Sadly, I avoid them as much as possible and keep conversations to small talk when I have to interact with them. It's not worth getting angry and stressed out, and you are not going to win against their Facebook algorithm. I do not like arguing with family, so I generally don't. If I think they will listen, I may try to explain. If not, I don't. I treated it the same way whenever I get some edgy atheist on Reddit giving hot takes on religion. I ignore it and move on with my life. I try to make them define the word believe and the word understand. It's a slow process, but separating faith and logic has been the only way I can get across to a few people. I believe 2 + 2 = 5 versus I understand 2 + 2 = 4 inches. Agree with everything they say. Ask for more information and follow-up questions and agree with that too. They will eventually believe that they have you convinced and will leave you alone. There is nothing to argue about if they think that they are right. Then you go home and laugh your butt off about what that person is actually telling others. Ask questions. Ask them to explain their position, why they think it is that way and how other facts come into play. Most importantly, let them do most of the talking. Be interested and carefully steer the conversation so that the flaws in their reasoning become apparent. Never strike a pose of told you so. Never start with a position that you are right and they are wrong. This will not work. It is hard work to pull someone out of their belief system, no matter how idiotic it may seem to you. So unless you have a real interest in pulling it through, maybe it is easiest to just walk away. Use Socratic method and instead ask them questions that get more and more pointed and intended to lead them down the path to self-discovery that no, the earth is not flat. No, this isn't just a standard blip in climate that occasionally happens. And no, the government isn't using vaccines to make your child autistic, intergender, disabled, microchipped. Here's a hint. It never works. It's like the SpongeBob Patrick meme floating around. At that point you find a different topic or wish them well and walk away. Is it really worth changing their minds? I take solace in the fact that they exist in their own alternative world of stupidity and that they routinely make fools of themselves when they speak to others. They're perpetually angry over Hillary, the liberals, the ACA, Pelosi, Schumer, minorities, etc. So their lives are punctuated by fits of outrage, fear and frustration. Meanwhile, my progressive mindset places me at ease. It's a passive form of revenge. The ironic thing is that in my family, it is the sibling who went to MIT and has a background in engineering and science who is currently denying all science. We are just ignoring his texts, emails and waiting for the moment when we can give him the family time honored "we told you do" treatment, which, if history serves, will give us a year or two of radio silence, because we have learned there is no reasoning with this sibling. Continue to try and explain until my friends always pull the "well, that's circumstantial evidence, you're one person" card, and then I'll lose my crap. With family I just don't bother. I've known them long enough to know they don't want to understand and it isn't worth the effort and stress. Depends. Is their belief going to have serious consequences? I won't bother to argue if they believe eating garlic every morning prevents cancer. I will argue if they are messing with the diet of a child who has refractory epilepsy by giving him extra fruits. Laugh in their face about how wrong it is. As they start to get more and more fed up, they start to talk about what they do kind of understand, which is usually wrong, which I correct them. It doesn't change anything, but getting them riled up is pretty funny. Thankfully I don't have any family or loved ones like that, but on the occasion I do meet someone like this, I give up any sort of notion of winning an argument as it is pointless. I would just try and ask about where they got this information, why they believe it, and what about the source makes them think it is reliable or true. I tell them the nice thing about science is that it's true whether you believe it or not. They usually shut up after that one. When prodded for my opinion I mention all the things I don't know crap about and things I cannot do, but I have been extensively trained on how to pick apart pieces of evidence. I have a sense on how strong a fact needs to be to support a subsequent theory on something. Talking about how the number of vaccines we use has increased a lot can't support crap. It depends what mood I'm in. If I'm comfortable enough, as in, I've had a few pints of social lubrication, I'll just keep asking them to explain in more and more detail until it's clear to everyone the hole they dug is well over their heads. Otherwise, I let them be. I learned the hard way that if someone has no interest in the truth, confronting them with it helps no one. That is, assuming they're like my family, and don't care for the truth. If they're genuinely interested and have just been misled down a rabbit hole, those can be the most rewarding conversations. I have to use the phrasing. As someone who has a degree in this field and who had done extensive lab research in relation to this topic, I know that article is wrong because of X, Y, and Z. The worst part is that people will tend to brush it off and say, well, education isn't everything. Then I somehow become the guy who hates people who haven't gone to college. When it comes to family, I know that if I successfully point out why someone is wrong with regards to a topic I have expertise in, I'll at the very least really pee them off. It's really about picking your battles. Some things I'll just bite my tongue, but if it's important enough I'll point out that I do in fact know more than they do. I just sigh. It's really hard to have my friends and family tell me how brilliant I am and then don't listen to a word I say. It's actually the main reason for the crippling depression right now. You don't make any money as a postdoc, but at least people used to respect you. And now I don't even have that. You can't affect the beliefs of someone who has deeply invested in bulls. The only time I bother hauling out facts and logic is if when others around might hear, read and be persuadable. I'm, soon to be, an electronic communications engineer. I was once laughing at how stupid some people could be to believe 5G could cause radiation cancer. She told me she believed it. I told her she's being a middle-aged Facebook lady, and made her watch an hour television documentary with her about the science behind it, regularly pausing and gently explaining to her how the technology works, and why they make certain points, etc. It worked. Amazing. As others have pointed out, there is no reasoning with nonsense. No matter how much I may love someone, I deal with it by not discussing the scientific-based truth because they can't handle it. The truth hurts, so I continue to love them while protecting myself from their stupidity. If it is out of my field, I'll be very honest and say I don't know, but I'll look into it and get back to you. They generally trust me enough to know I won't bulls them. If it is a subject in my field, I just preface every sentence with "as a doctor," until they relent. One best example is animal experimentation. Because I say that, I do not want to launch myself into a debate about animal experimentation. I do not care about how you think it is wrong and should be banned, or we should use criminals instead of animals and other bulls. I already have the government trying to frick with us with increasing regulations. I'm not going to do that on Reddit. I have scientific friends who gets in Facebook pages against animal experimentation just to debate with the crowd of anti-experimenters. They genuinely try to defuse their arguments, but it's always pointless because we are the evil monsters paid by the pharmaceuticals and getting rich out of it. LOL, I wish I don't deal with them. It's so freaking useless and exhausting. They make conferences or sometimes manifestations for it, and I try real hard to not pay attention to it because it would be angering myself for something that is absolutely not worth it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.